1800 hours on May 5th, 2025, the lead pilot felt the raw power of his F-15i ROM as 58,000 pounds of thrust slammed him against his seat. 20 Israeli ROMs were unleashed that evening, clawing their way off the runway at Houthis Air Base, ascending towards 35,000 feet. Their objective, a Houthi-controlled port nestled in Yemen. Unbeknownst to the ground crew, watching them disappear into the twilight, they were witnessing the dawn of what would become the longest-range combat operation in the history of the Israeli Air Force. His F-15I was burdened with 4 GBU-31 JDAMs, 2,000-pound bunker busters engineered to pulverize reinforced concrete. His wingmen trailed behind, armed with GBU-32s, their smaller 1,000-pound cousins. 18 other ROMs followed, each carrying similar payloads, every pilot acutely aware they were pushing their aircraft to the absolute edge of their operational limits. The F-15I ROMs conformal fuel tanks, those distinctive bulges you see along the fuselage, held an extra 845 gallons of JP-8 fuel, extending the aircraft's combat radius from 800 kilometers to a staggering 1,600. Supplemented by external fuel tanks and the promise of air-to-air refueling, they could strike targets 2,000 kilometers distant and still return home in time for breakfast. As the 20-ship formation climbed through 25,000 feet, the lead pilot's Israeli-built GPS inertial navigation system calculated the route to Yemen with ruthless precision, accurate to within 3 meters, even if the enemy attempted to jam GPS signals. Launching from secure bases deep within Israel, rather than exposed forward positions, meant the Houthis would receive no early warning, no whisper of impending doom, until the first bombs began to fall. At 18:15 hours, the lead pilot leveled off at cruising altitude and banked southwest towards the Red Sea. Ahead lay 2,000 kilometers of hostile airspace, a complex mid-air refueling operation, and targets that the Houthis confidently assumed were safely beyond Israeli reach. But a problem loomed, a critical calculation that threatened to unravel the entire mission. Even with those massive conformal fuel tanks, the F-15s were carrying such a heavy ordnance and flying such a vast distance that they were projected to run critically low on fuel somewhere over the Red Sea. Without a successful refueling operation within the next 90 minutes, 20 of Israel's most advanced fighters would become nothing more than expensive artificial reefs. At 19:30 hours, the lead pilot stared at fuel gauges mirroring the grim predictions of his mission planner. But those calculations were predicated on everything proceeding flawlessly, a dangerous assumption in the unforgiving crucible of war. 1 hour and 30 minutes after takeoff, his F-15I was consuming fuel at the predicted rate, leaving zero margin for error. If they didn't rendezvous with their tankers within the next few minutes, they would be forced to turn back, their wings still heavy with unspent bombs, a prospect no one was willing to accept. Just as the flight lead prepared to issue the abort order, 4 KC-77 REM tankers materialized dead ahead, holding position at 35,000 feet, their boom operators bracing for the most demanding refueling operation of their careers. Each F-15I required precisely 4,000 pounds of fuel to reach Yemen, deliver its payload of destruction, and limp back to Israeli airspace. They had not a second to squander. The KC-77's rigid refueling boom, that imposing appendage extending from the aircraft's tail, can pump 1,000 gallons per minute, rapid enough to replenish multiple fighters without lingering in harm's way over hostile territory. Each tanker carried 30,000 gallons of transferable fuel, capable of remaining on station for 6 hours. But this mission demanded a speedier turnaround. The lead pilot commenced his approach, reporting his progress as he delicately eased his now 70,000-pound fighter into formation behind the lead tanker. Both aircraft were traveling at 300 knots, maintaining a formation so precise it demanded the skill of a neurosurgeon. The KC-77's boom operator, lying prone in the tanker's tail section, guided the rigid steel tube towards the lead pilot's fuel receptacle, employing hydraulic controls that afforded pinpoint accuracy down to the millimeter. Any deviation in airspeed, altitude, or heading could snap the boom connection, potentially sending both aircraft spiraling out of control. The boom operator had to compensate for turbulence, minute aircraft movements, and the raw physics of connecting two objects hurtling through the air at hundreds of miles per hour. "Contact!" crackled the radio as the boom locked into the lead pilot's receptacle with a resounding metallic clang. For the next 4 minutes, 4,000 pounds of JP-8 aviation fuel surged from the KC-77 into his ROM, both aircraft maintaining perfect formation. Without this critical aerial refueling capability, Israeli F-15s would be confined to targets within a 1,600-kilometer radius, effectively excluding most of Yemen and enabling Iran to establish unhindered weapon supply routes beyond Israeli reach. This successful refueling operation signaled that no Iranian proxy anywhere in the Middle East could consider themselves beyond retribution. As the last F-15I disconnected from the final tanker, the strike package was committed, pressing on towards its target. At 21:45 hours, the coastline of Yemen appeared on their infrared displays. The Heda port complex was still actively engaged in offloading Iranian weapons shipments, deceitfully disguised as humanitarian aid. They were oblivious to the fact that 50 precision-guided munitions were about to transform Iran's Red Sea logistics hub into a smoldering wasteland. At precisely 2200 hours, the target materialized on their screens. The sprawling Heda port complex, etched against the Yemeni coastline in crystal-clear thermal imagery, boasted container cranes, storage warehouses, fuel tanks, and pier facilities covering nearly 2 square kilometers, making it Iran's most critical weapons artery to the Houthis. The lightning targeting pod, nestled beneath each pilot's aircraft, worked tirelessly, its gimbal rotating 360 degrees while maintaining unwavering target lock, even during the bone-jarring strain of 6Gs in a combat turn. Its thermal imaging effortlessly pierced through smoke and darkness, while the TV camera magnified the scene with 30 times zoom, capable of identifying individual people from 20 kilometers away. Through the pod's optics, the lead pilot confirmed they had reached their objective. Iranian weapons shipments were concealed alongside legitimate humanitarian supplies within the warehouse complexes, while underground bunkers provided climate-controlled storage for the most sensitive military equipment. The massive fuel storage tanks adjacent to the main pier held enough diesel to sustain the port's operations, and, more explosively, enough to create a massive conflagration when ignited by a few well-placed 2,000-pound bombs. Almost every ballistic missile, drone component, and explosive device employed in Houthi attacks over the preceding 18 months had passed through these facilities. The Houthis had effectively transformed Yemen into Iran's forward ammunition depot, and this port was the front door. Intelligence indicated that over 70% of Iranian weapon shipments transited through Heda. Neutralizing this facility would inflict more than a minor setback. Almost perfectly on cue, 2 Iranian container ships were moored at the main pier, their crews completely unaware that the long arm of justice was about 60 seconds away. Armed guards patrolled near the warehouse complexes, Houthi fighters securing what they mistakenly believed was a supply depot safely beyond Israeli retaliation. They were about to be violently disabused of that notion. As the lead pilot acquired visual confirmation, he signaled the attack, pushing his F-15I into a 30-degree dive towards the port. The Lightning Pod's computer was updating target coordinates in real time, automatically compensating for wind, aircraft movements, and atmospheric conditions to ensure his JDAM would strike within 3 meters of the designated aim point. The first GBU-31 was armed and ready. In 60 seconds, a 2,000-pound precision-guided munition would remind the Houthis why attacking Israeli airports was a catastrophic mistake. At 22:03 hours, the lead pilot's first GBU-31 JDAM impacted the Heda port's main container crane. The 2,000-pound warhead was not merely a large bomb, it was a meticulously engineered demolition tool designed to obliterate hardened infrastructure. The weapon's hardened steel penetrator punched through 6 feet of reinforced concrete before the 945 pounds of tritonal explosive detonated deep inside the target. The massive crane, capable of lifting 40-ton containers, buckled as the explosion shredded its main support structure. But this was merely the opening salvo. Every 15 seconds, another JDAM found its target with mathematical precision, each impact meticulously timed to maximize destruction while avoiding interference between weapons. The second strike targeted the port's fuel storage containers, 6 massive above-ground tanks containing tens of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel. The GBU-31's penetrator warhead design focused explosive energy directly into the tank walls, rupturing the fuel containment and igniting a fireball that billowed 200 meters into the evening sky. Strikes 3 and 4 pulverized the main warehouse complex where Iranian weapons were stored. Each 2,000-pound warhead delivered the explosive equivalent of 945 pounds of TNT, more than sufficient to collapse reinforced concrete walls and detonate any ammunition stored within. Secondary explosions erupted throughout the facility as Iranian-supplied rockets and artillery shells detonated in chain reactions. On the ground, Houthi personnel were finally comprehending the unfolding catastrophe. Through his targeting pod, the lead pilot observed figures running between buildings, some pointing rifles skyward, others frantically shouting into radios. But at 35,000 feet, the F-15 ROMs were well beyond the engagement envelope of small arms and the light anti-aircraft guns positioned around the port. Their surface-to-air missiles were strategically positioned to protect Sana'a, not this remote facility they had assumed was safely beyond Israeli reach. The systematic annihilation continued as strikes 5 through 8 targeted the pier structure itself. Each JDAM was programmed with GPS coordinates that placed them at the junction points where pier supports met the main dock structure. Destroying these specific structural points caused entire sections of the pier to collapse, rendering it impossible to unload ships, even if the cranes had survived the onslaught. By 2027, a mere 4 minutes after the initial impact, the Heda port had been effectively erased from the map. The massive concrete structures, designed to withstand Red Sea storms and ship impacts, were reduced to rubble by weapons specifically engineered to defeat hardened targets. Even if the Houthis somehow managed to repair the physical damage, they no longer possessed the cranes, fuel storage, or pier infrastructure necessary to handle large-scale weapon shipments. But Iran's support network extended beyond simply shipping weapons. They had also provided the Houthis with the industrial capacity to conceal their weapons locally, and that infrastructure was next in line. At 22 hours, with the Heda port burning fiercely behind them, 4 F-15s from the formation were lining up on a target that appeared deceptively innocuous from the air, but was vital to eliminate: the Bajiel concrete factory. To most observers, attacking a concrete plant with precision-guided munitions might seem like overkill. However, Israeli intelligence had identified this facility as one of the most critical military targets in Yemen. The Houthis were not using this facility to manufacture sidewalks. Iranian engineers had surreptitiously modified the plant to produce ultra-high strength concrete, incorporating specialized additives that created bunker walls capable of withstanding conventional bombing. Every underground command post, weapons storage facility, and tunnel complex the Houthis had constructed over the past 2 years relied on concrete produced at this factory. Neutralizing it would eliminate their ability to protect future military installations from air attacks. Through their targeting pods, the pilots observed the facility's industrial complex spread across several acres. Multiple concrete mixing towers soared 40 meters into the air, connected by conveyor systems that transported raw materials between processing buildings. The plant's civilian workforce had evacuated when the port strikes commenced, but Houthi security forces remained on site in a futile attempt to protect their investment. At 22:24, the lead pilot's wingman released the first GBU-32 JDAM towards the facility's primary mixing tower. The GBU-32's 445-pound explosive payload created a massive blast that would soon shred machinery, electrical systems, and industrial equipment throughout the target area. The ensuing explosion ripped through the tower's reinforced concrete structure before detonating inside the machinery spaces, sending a massive cloud of concrete dust and steel fragments cascading across the complex. The 40-meter tower collapsed onto adjacent buildings, instantly obliterating the facility's primary production capability. Strikes 2 and 3 targeted the cement storage silos, massive containers holding hundreds of tons of raw materials. The explosions ruptured the silos' walls, unleashing billowing dust clouds that mixed with fires from ignited equipment, transforming the entire facility into a choking wasteland. The final strike eliminated the electrical substations that powered the facility's operations. Without electricity, any surviving equipment was rendered useless, and repairs would necessitate completely rebuilding the industrial infrastructure from scratch. The precision required to strike specific components within the complex while avoiding nearby civilian structures demonstrated the GBU-32's pinpoint accuracy, precise to within 5 meters even at maximum range. By 2022, the Bajiel concrete factory had been utterly destroyed, its specialized production capabilities permanently crippled. The Houthis had lost their capacity to construct new hardened facilities, forcing them to rely on existing bunkers that were now vulnerable vulnerable to future Israeli strikes. More significantly, Iran's investment in their clandestine fortification project had been eradicated in less than 20 minutes. This is Goba military. Subscribe for more real-time battlefield breakdowns and tactical deep dives.